From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Laura Palmero. Roadblocks and protests have intensified in Bolivia after the lack of answers on a definitive date for the presidential elections and in demand for the resignation of the de facto president, Janine Áñez. Close to a week of protests, roadblocks and mobilizations organized by civil organizations in several regions in the country keep uninterrupted. Meanwhile, the Bolivian Central Workers and Farmer movements assured that road blockades will be maintained on 100 routes in the Andean region, despite the pressure of irregular groups against the population. At least 60 protesters were arrested and 40 still remain in detention. Farmers and miners convened a march to be held this Monday in retaliation to the government decision to extend the presidential elections. In an exclusive interview for Telesur, the militant and political analyst Daniel Solis affirmed that the government faces with double intent the road blockades.
The same mobilized bases throughout Bolivia are demanding for the leadership both the Unity Pact and the Bolivian Workers' Center, who have called for this mobilization that must not betray the demand of the people. As I told them earlier, all blocking points in their generality are already calling for the resignation of the de facto president, Janine Áñez. No longer elections, no longer trusting that the elections will guarantee change or the democratic transition that Bolivia is wanting. The government acts with two faces, with one hand offering dialogue and with the other hand you repressing fascist groups. You are representing what the complicity of the police to the points of blockade.
Solis also noted that various social organizations radicalized the measures that the blockades in response to the repression of the de facto government.
Currently, the night departments are blocked. It's free by the mobilizations convened by social organizations. The demands have initially been the elections. The election dates to be respected for September 6th, as the initially was called. However, by the double face of the government, the skill of fascist groups that have acted since yesterday, and that in Cochabamba, trying to unblock the blockades. The blockades are radicalized. The measures and the general slogan now in most of the blockades demand the resignation of the de facto president, Janine Áñez.
In Colombia, campesinos in the region of Guayabero who were demanding an end to the forced eradication of illegal crops have been illegally detained by the country's armed forces. The campesinos say they were protesting peacefully against the ongoing violence in their territory, but were met with heavy military repression, including women and children who were present. The campesinos also denounced that the soldiers stole their personal belongings and illegally detained more than 50 people. The FARC party took to Twitter the condemn to attack, adding that humanistic doctrine is needed to guarantee the rights of the protesters, where dialogue prevails over force. In Brazil, fires are being set in the state of Mato Grosso, allegedly by safe farmers clearing out vegetation of their plantations. Similar acts of illegal farmers and paramilitary groups working for transnational companies were responsible for last year's destruction to rainforest. Experts have warned that the situation could significantly worsen this year. Nonetheless, Brazil's far-right government has hailed figures that show a slight reduction in deforestation in July when compared to last year, likely caused by a slowdown in economic activities due to COVID-19 pandemic. And now we'll go to a short break. Follow us on social media and don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko won re-election with 80% of the vote at the country's presidential election. The Central Election Commission affirmed that Stavlina Tikhanovsky, a former English teacher who emerged as Lukashenko's main rival at election on Sunday, won 9.9% of the vote. The preliminary results were announced as the Belarusian police fired water cannons, tear gas and stun grenades into a crowd crackdown on protests that erupted on Sunday. In Belarus, the leader of the opposition, Lena Hitanovsky, called the mobilizations to reject the preliminary results of the presidential elections announced on Sunday. Mobilizations were held in cities such as Minsk, Brest, and Vitebsk after the preliminary results were widely led by the current president, Alexander Lukashenko. Protests degenerated into violent confrontations that left several people injured. However, police forces dispersed the demonstrators and several were arrested. The events occurred in allegations by the government of Belarus of Western interference in coordination with the opposition factors for destabilizing actions of the government of Lukashenko. Hundreds of Spanish protesters have taken to the streets in Madrid to denounce former King Juan Carlos for leaving the country amid a growing financial scandal. Speculation over his whereabouts gripped the nation since he announced his departure to an unspecified destination last week. Protesters accused the former king of being a thief and called for the monarchy to be abolished. Juan Carlos is the target of official investigations into possible financial wrongdoing in Spain and Switzerland. In Hungary, one man has died and 3 others were seriously injured when a tourist bus crashed into a ditch on the side of a highway. The bus was carrying 46 tourists and was heading to Budapest when the accident occurred. A 35-year-old man died at the scene while 34 people were injured, including a 5-year-old child. Local police have launched an investigation into the accident. In Puerto Rico, the State Election Commission suspended the primary elections up to next Sunday, August 16th. The decision of the electoral body comes after many of the polling stations did not receive the ballots to properly accomplish the electoral process that was supposed to develop this Sunday. According to the resolution by the electoral body on early Sunday, voting centers that began the casting of ballots could continue for the 8 hours corresponding period for the voting. On the other hand, voting centers that had not begun the process should resume the elections next Sunday. The situation has led several political leaders to ask for the complete cancellation of the primaries.
Let no one doubt that, as governor, I will not allow the rights of our citizens to be not trampled. There must be complete transparency and absolute guarantee of the constitutional rights of all Puerto Ricans. Followed by all the events this Sunday, the correct position is to protect the vote of every person who exercises its right to vote. In the same way, the next day, in that this process will continue, it is guaranteed the right to vote to all those citizens who could not vote this Sunday.
Meanwhile, members of the socialist movement of workers took the street against the protests against the government lack of control of travelers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Demonstrators gathered in the entrance of Luis Muñoz Marin International Airport as they claimed that incoming travelers could trigger further spread of new infections, overwhelming the country's intensive care unit's capacity. Because of the colonial situation of the island, Puerto Rico's government can't order the closure of airports without the U.S. government approval.
We have been demanding that the necessary measures be taken to control the flow of tourists to the airport. We have been seeing about 5,000 people who enter daily, and the government has not had the capability to implement the necessary control measures. Only 25% of people entering have evidences of molecular testing, and the other 75% are free, meaning that they should be quarantined on a voluntary basis, as the government doesn't have the capability to implement it. On the other hand, we are seeing how intense care beds are already at 70% capacity. Therefore, what we are requesting, what we are demanding is that greater controls be implemented to that flow of passengers from abroad to the safeguard health and safety, and that we can have a number of beds necessary to serve the population in Puerto Rico.
And in the United States, the COVID-19 infection tally reached the extraordinary milestone of 5 million cases. The North American country is by far the worst affected country by the pandemic, with the highest death rate of nearly 163,000, only ahead of Brazil, which on Saturday surpassed 100,000 deaths. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump was accused of floating the Constitution by unilaterally extending a virus relief package. Jamaica's Prime Minister Andy Holness says the tourism-dependent nation cannot close its borders despite a surge in coronavirus cases. The country currently has 1,003 positive cases of COVID-19, 745 recoveries and 13 deaths.
The prospect of closing our borders for an extended period is not one that is feasible. It is not. We would be cutting off our nose despite our face. So Jamaica, more than other countries, must learn very quickly how to live with COVID-19. That is the reality. We must learn how to live with this.
And President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, reported 844 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours. 47 of them are imported. He also informed of 8 new deaths by the virus.
Today we have 844 new cases, of which 797 cases are community transmitted and 47 are imported cases. As the constitutional president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, I will now sign a decree to extend the state of alarm for 30 more days, as allowed by law. 30 more days are from August 9. This will let us take the necessary measures that are needed at this time.
COVID-19 cases have surged in Venezuela despite the best efforts by authorities to contain the outbreak. As such, measures are being intensified to protect the public's health.
21 weeks after the fight against COVID-19 started, Venezuela is seeing a surge in community infections, setting new records over the past few days. Increased containment efforts have focused on providing support to healthcare workers, making medicine more widely available and setting up field hospitals to treat those infected.
This pandemic is a great challenge for humanity. People need to take care of themselves and of each other.
But despite the spike in cases, the recovery rate remains at over 50%.
This is a difficult situation, coming on top of the blockade and the far-right attacks, but we are overcoming.
Every patient who defeats the disease turns into the best advocate for preventive measures.
Take care of yourselves. I do not wish this disease on anyone. It is very difficult to be isolated.
To have overcome the disease has been a great victory, but there are still too many people who are ignoring how dangerous this is.
In the meantime, the Bolivarian nation is working with the Pan American Health Organization, as well as other international organizations, to acquire much-needed health support.
And we have more news coming up after this financial break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The recent explosion in Lebanon's capital that resulted in over 150 deaths has erupted in a new wave of protests near the parliament in Beirut. During the second day of anti-government protests, demonstrators clashed again with Lebanese police as they tried to break into the parliament headquarters on Sunday. Lebanon's political elite faces pressure from all sides as citizen demands an end to corruption, bad governance and mismanagement. The Environment Minister Demianos Qatar and Information Minister Manal Abdel Samad both announced their resignation following the disaster that has revived anger at a ruling class seen as living in luxury, while millions endure job losses, deep in poverty, power blackouts and garbage mountains piling up in the streets. The Afghan Grand Assembly approved on Sunday the release of 400 Taliban prisoners, the last batch among 5,000 prisoners to be freed, as a condition for the continuation of the peace talks. The decision of the Loya Jirga has removed the last excuse on the way to peace talks. We are on the verge of peace talks, said Abdullah. Abdullah has been appointed by the government to lead negotiations with the Taliban group. According to an official list provided by the Afghan government, many of the inmates are accused of serious offenses, with more than 150 of them on death row. The list also includes a group of 44 insurgents of particular concern for their high profile and probability of making attacks. And 8 people, including 6 French nationals, have been killed by unidentified gunmen in Niger. The French citizens, their local guide and driver were shot dead by gunmen who were riding motorcycles in the wildlife park located in the country's southwestern region. The 6 were employees of an international humanitarian organization. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. The latest mission of Chinese peacekeepers to Mali has started their work in the city of Gao. The team has arrived in the country last month and went into quarantine in accordance with health protocols. Their one-year mission includes patrolling, infrastructure construction, and providing medical services. Mali has been gripped by violent conflict since 2012, resulting in the deaths and displacement of thousands of people. The leader of Mali's M5 opposition movement, Imam Mahmoud Dicko, has called for fresh protests against President Ibrahim Keita. In a televised address on Sunday evening, the influential Imam asked citizens to take the streets on Tuesday and remain there until Keita steps down.
11 août, à la place de l'indépendance, c'est une journée décisive. C'est montrer que le peuple malien est un peuple debout, qu'on n'est pas un peuple résigné. On n'est pas un peuple résigné, on n'est pas un peuple soumis, et que nous préférons mourir en martyr que de vivre en traître. Et nous devrons le montrer et le démontrer le 11, Inch'Allah.
Mauritania's President Mohamed Ghazouani has appointed a new government following the resignation of the Prime Minister and his entire government on Thursday over alleged corruption. Several of the now former ministers were questioned by investigators about suspected corrupt activities that happened under their watch while serving in the government of former President Mohamed Abdelaziz.
It was normal to allow those sired reporters to be released to prove their innocence. That's why they are among those affected by this change. The President of the Republic, aware of his role as guarantor of the Constitution, is committed to the principle of separation and independence of powers.
The Commissioner's office at the Chinese Foreign Ministry in Hong Kong has condemned sanctions recently imposed on its officials by the United States. The officials say U.S. sanctions will be self-defeating and have no legal power in Hong Kong, as they have been unilaterally imposed by a foreign government. They add that it is legitimate rights for the country to formulate and implement national security laws within their sovereignty territory. Washington imposed sanctions on 11 Hong Kong officials on Friday as it works to obstruct and undermine efforts to safeguard national security by attacking and swerving the law and those who support it. And we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Laura Palmero. Thank you for watching.